At one point, the driver slowed down without saying anything. The dust rose heavily, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Joseph was the first to sense this suspicious silence. "Mother!" he whispered. Catherine was coughing but stopped abruptly. Henry looked toward the hills, fascinated by that silence that was too clean. Then they appeared. Not from the front. Not from the back. From nowhere, as if the earth had pushed them to the surface. 6 silhouettes. On horseback. Motionless. Their horses did not seem impatient, but attentive. The men carried rifles, bows, wore tanned leather clothes, and had painted faces. No shout. No hurry. The driver clenched the reins in his fists. "Don't move," he said softly to his horses. One of the men approached. He did not seem like a leader by clothes or ornaments, but by the way the others did nothing without a sign from him. His eyes passed over the people like over a known terrain. Then they stopped on the children. He said something short in a harsh language. They were guerrilla. The driver responded with gestures, not words. He pointed to the mail bags. He pointed to the road. He pointed to the sky. The man looked at Catherine. He saw her coughing. He saw the weakness in her eyes. Not with contempt. He weighed everything with the eyes of a warrior evaluating a potential danger. "Sick woman," he said, and his broken English sounded like a verdict. "Children." Catherine straightened her back, though every vertebra ached. Then she bowed her head. "We are going to Santa Fe." A long silence followed. Joseph felt his heart beating in his throat. Henry was not yet afraid. He watched with curiosity the feathers, the horses, the faces that showed neither hatred nor mercy. Another guerrilla dismounted and opened one of the mail bags. He took out a letter, looked at the seal, then put it back. He was not interested in paper. He was interested in movement. "Soldiers?" the leader asked. "No," the driver replied. "Just people fleeing the war." The man smiled briefly. Without joy. "Everyone flees from something." Then he made a sign. They took 2 small bags. Not gold. Not money. Food, flour, and coffee. "The road is ours until sunset," he said. And they retreated just as they had appeared. Without hurry. Without noise. Their horses melted into the landscape. The stagecoach started again. Henry broke the silence. "Mother, were they bad?" Catherine squeezed his hand. "You never know." The driver spat in the dust. "Those are guerrilla. If they wanted blood, we wouldn't be here now." Joseph looked back toward the hills. For the first time, he understood that the road does not belong to those who travel it, but to those who know it. And that, sometimes, survival comes not from strength, but from the fact that someone lets you pass. When Santa Fe appeared on the horizon, it was not a paradise. It was just a small, dusty town with wide streets and people speaking languages they did not understand. But for Catherine, it was the destination. She breathed in the dry air. It still hurt, but it was a different kind of pain, one that smelled of sage and freedom. For Joseph, it was an end of the road that looked like a beginning, and for Henry, it was the first place that no longer smelled of winter. The road had changed them all. It had taken their weakness and left them with fatigue. But it had brought them there. And sometimes, that was all that mattered. When they arrived in Santa Fe, no one greeted them. The city was not in the habit of welcoming weary people with open arms. The sun was milder, as they had been told, and the air drier, but that did not mean life had become any easier. The McCarty family's last savings had melted away on the road, coin by coin, as if the distance between New York and Santa Fe had been paid for not in miles, but in hollow hopes. The war had changed everything. Houses were few, and those available cost a fortune. A room, a corner of a floor, a shared bed, these had become privileges. Food was expensive and poor, and the markets were filled with strained faces, people buying in fear, as if every bag of flour might be their last. Joseph looked for work daily. He asked at warehouses, workshops, and stables. Most often, he received cold stares. Sometimes questions. "Where did you come from?" "New York." The answer was never enough. People looked at one another with suspicion. Too far. Too sudden. Too many stories of Southern spies and Union agents circulated through the city. Strangers were dangerous, especially those who claimed to have crossed the country at war. Henry felt the tension without understanding it. He felt how the city rejected them, how people's voices stopped when he passed by, and how doors closed just a little faster than they should have behind him. Catherine tried to remain upright, but her body no longer obeyed her. Her cough returned with violence, more painful than before. The arid air burned her lungs. The fits came unexpectedly and left her strengthless, her hands trembling and her eyes full of fear. The transition from the filthy humidity of New York to the unforgiving dryness of New Mexico had been too abrupt. A real doctor was hard to find. Those who called themselves doctors were tired, unskilled, or drunk. Their remedies were empty promises and bottles smelling of alcohol. Catherine knew she was fading, even if she didn't say it. One evening, in a makeshift shelter, they learned the truth. The best doctors had left. They were no longer there. The war had drawn them east, toward Indianapolis, where field hospitals had been established. That was where the wounded from the front were treated, and where the finest physicians had gathered. There, hope still remained. Joseph was the first to understand what this meant. A new journey. More expenses. Another unknown. "Mother," he said softly. "I know," Catherine replied. Henry looked at both of them. He didn't know where Indianapolis was. But he knew his mother was coughing harder, and that Santa Fe would not accept them. The decision was not made with enthusiasm, but with desperation. Santa Fe had been a promise unfulfilled. War left no room for fragile people. So, they packed their bags once more. They looked at the city one last time, without regret. And they set out again, this time not toward a dream, but toward a final hope. The road had not ended. It had only become harder. The Santa Fe Trail. They learned one day that a merchant caravan was set to leave for the east. In those times, safety did not come from speed, but from numbers. A wagon train traveling the Santa Fe Trail had rules, weapons, men accustomed to death, and above all, the chance to get lost in the crowd. For the McCarty family, it was the only option. They chose that caravan not out of courage, but out of calculation. Catherine took the only job the world still offered a sick woman: hard labor. She cooked for the hungry men of the convoy, washed clothes caked in mud and dried blood, and boiled dirty water until she hoped it became safe. The caravan carried supplies to the front and followed a military convoy that had passed a few days prior. It was the perfect moment. The soldiers had scared off the tribes and bandits, and the road, for a while, seemed quieter. But silence on the Santa Fe Trail did not mean peace. Between Council Grove and Independence, the land was poisoned by fear. There, the shadows ruled, the bushwhackers and guerrilla gangs. Their leaders were William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson. They were not ordinary thieves, but soldiers without an army, leading guerrillas who struck like lightning, looted, and vanished. They controlled the roads, the inns, and the rumors. Those leading the caravan knew this. So, they traveled by night, changed their route on the fly, and extinguished fires before sunset. At one point, they employed a simple but clever diversion. They left a broken wagon behind as bait and diverted from the main road through a less traveled corridor. In doing so, they managed to sow confusion among the bandits, and crossed their territory without trouble. At Westport, the world seemed to be tearing in two. The city was a vital hub, and in October, it had been the scene of a massive battle. The scars were still there: burned buildings, dead horses, and men without uniforms looting in the name of no one. Retreating Confederates took everything they could. An extra wagon could mean life for them. Joseph understood then something he would never forget: the law does not protect you better than your own wits or the gun at your hip. Thus they reached the Cimarron Cut-off, the most feared stretch of the road. A desert without trees, without hills, without hiding places. Water was scarce. The sky was merciless. There caravans were visible from miles away. It was the territory of the Comanche, hunters of the road, patient and ruthless. In the evenings they circled the wagons. Animals in the center. Men stood watch under the wagons with weapons ready. Joseph sometimes saw smoke on the hills. Other times, in the morning, he heard distant cries, echoes of a battle that was not for them, but could have been. These nights entered his bones. That was how he learned to sleep with his eyes open. Sometimes the caravan was escorted by Union soldiers they called Galvanized Yankees. They were former Southern prisoners recruited to fight in the West against the Indians. These were men with resentments, with eyes that viewed New York as an abstract enemy. Catherine felt their hostility. She spoke as little as she could. She worked hard. The cough scratched her chest, but she did not complain. They stopped at well-known landmarks: Lost Spring, Diamond Springs. The same springs for hundreds of people and thousands of animals. The water was infested. No one spoke of it. Dysentery was too common to scare anyone anymore. Catherine, her body weakened by tuberculosis, was the first hit. Fever. A cough that was no longer just from her chest, but from the depths of her soul. There was talk of cholera. People treated themselves with whiskey, hoping to keep the disease at bay. When they reached Missouri, the overland journey ended. St. Louis greeted them with smoke, noise, and chaos. The gateway to the West was now a military city. There was no bridge over the Mississippi. Crossing to the other side was done by ferry. They waited for days to secure a spot on a vessel. There were makeshift tents everywhere. Mud. Thieves. Deserters. So-called sharks preyed on the refugees. The port was full of people taking advantage of them. Some sold fake ferry tickets, others offered to guard their luggage while they went to buy food, only to disappear with their few belongings. Joseph had to be tough. To argue. To fight. To never let anything out of his sight.